of thought, reason, and emotion, self, genealogies, and collective identities of the Malays as a civilization. But this should not be seen erroneously as local knowledge, but as the uniqueness of cosmologies and culture contributing to global history and universal knowledge. His narratives of Kedah and Pulau Pinang and the Minangkabaus are integral in this respect. He has written some 19 books on media and journalism studies and social and intellectual history. Some of these are media history, world news and communication features in 2005, Batu Uban, Sejarah Awal Pulau Pinang, 2015. I read this, betul ya? In other words, Ideas of Journalism, Social Science and Society in 2017, Revisiting Atas Angin, a review of the Malay imagination of Ram, the Feringhi and the Penjajah in 2019. Apa dia? Room, sorry. Ram jadi lain pula kan? Mohon maaf. And Batu Uban, Tanjung and Bagan, Pengkisahan Sejarah as an editor in 2020. His latest books in 2022 titled The Avatar of 1786, Decolonizing the Penang Story. Okay, that's one. And another one, Countering the Western Canon, Other Ways of Knowing Journalism and Media. And lastly, Tanah Air, Passing Through the Malay Archipelago, is being published by Ustad IIUM. Here his work focuses on aspects of Malay civilization. He is a columnist for the National Daily and News Times, the Weekly Melaka Hari Ini, and the National Opinion Journal, Dewan Masyarakat. So Dato is a very, very, very active man. I don't know where he got his energy to do all those. I will be having headache if I have to do all the things that they have been doing. Anyway, I have about 5 questions. Maybe not questions lah, prompt. But it will be based on the synopsis that you have given us, that we have already shared in our publicity media. I'm not going to run away from that, of course, because this is a sembang-sembang, so we can go off tangent dan melanggar dan tak apalah kan. So I have these 5 questions, maybe you can sort of respond to them. And then after that, I will open to anybody here to ask you any questions. Don't mind the intellectual lingo and everything, it's just us showing off. Okay? So we can speak in a lower common language also. Alright, so you can ask anything. Use aku lah. Anyway, I have 5, but it will be based on your synopsis. First 2 is, maybe I can read a bit, translated from what we have given us. Museum can be approached from 3 perspectives. First, as an object of physical form, like a building. Secondly, as a living field, an exhibition space for contemporary cultural experiences. And third, as both object and a living field. Okay, now maybe 2 questions. One, as a building, which here you mentioned can be taken as a medium. Secondly, as a living field. As a building, not only as a medium but as a space for communication. And interestingly enough, I hope I did a correct translation here, manifestations of symbols of nation state and local cultural philosophy, as well as bridge between the past, present and future. As living field, displaying layers of cultural network and thinking of particular locality. So satu, museum sebagai objek, sebagai building. Satu lagi, museum sebagai satu lapangan hidup, living field. So minta Dato' tolong elaborate sedikit. Okay, boleh? Kita start dengan yang itu. Okay. Alright.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum. It has always been a pleasure to be here in this environment, in this context of sharing thoughts and experiences to others with regard to the interests of a person who is in the university for some time. When I asked you the question, whose ego, I was expecting it to be my ego. Actually, when you talk to your professors, you're talking to an ego. All professors are egoistic. All lecturers, all intellectuals, all scholars have their egos. They are only like that because they have an ego. So again, speakers sometimes, as a result of their experience and putting together their calling, they become arrogant when they speak. So perhaps you will see this in me or in Professor Asno and in others. I'm delighted to be here because I've always liked to associate myself with artists, people who are in art history, fine art. When I was a student in Malaysia as well as overseas, I would associate myself with students from other areas. There are two areas which I have always associated myself with. These are art students. I have a special art here would also extend to architecture, because art and architecture and those spheres would conjure a certain background that I may not have in my training. I'm trained in the social sciences. By and large, I'm a social scientist. I am exposed to a number of areas, political science, journalism, and the other one in history and philosophy of science, meaning the approach to history and philosophy from a social science perspective. So that was my PhD. And there are things that when we learn in our discipline or in area which are insufficient for us to know the world. We want to understand the world as a human being and as a student. What is the purpose of science? Meaning knowledge. The purpose of science or knowledge, one of which is to understand the world around us. We want to understand what's happening in the immediate reality. For example, what's happening in this museum? What's happening in this room? What's happening in this immediate environment? And also there is this non-immediate environment, the unseen, distant phenomena, or nomina. Nomina means the metaphysical environment. So all these are the universe. The small universe and the large universe, the unseen universe and the seen universe that educates us, that conjures our interest, that enlightens us. So in our journey as a student and human being, and for us as those who work in an environment that requires us to know this forever, it is important for us to relate our experience, our immediate experience with the experience of others. So one of which is my questions and probes to art students. One of the things that art students learn is perspective. They learn about art history. They talk about logic. They talk about the dot, the concept of the center, and where everything else begins with the dot. Metaphysically, empirically, that's what it is. When you write something, you start with the dot. When you type on a computer, you type from the dot. The form is the dot. And creation begins with the dot. So we talk about biology, we talk about evolution, we talk about any form of existence. So this is what I learned from those who transcend and involve themselves in art. The other one is scientists. My colleagues in physics and mathematics. I'm poor in mathematics. I'm not good, or maybe I failed. But again, perhaps the teaching of mathematics in schools will be different from the teaching of the realization and the consciousness of mathematics at the higher level. My interest in mathematics do not start from school. My interest in mathematics started when I was in university. And the mathematics that I'm interested in was not the mathematics that was learned in school, but the idea of mathematics, the idea of lines, the philosophy of mathematics, numbers, the philosophy of numbers. And again, when you merge these things together, you get a certain perspective or certain logic. This is also important with regard to the learning of music. I don't have the opportunity to take music, but I send my kids to study music. One of them has managed to play the piano. The other one, his fingers are too stubby, so he dropped out from guitar many years back. But music is important in terms of how we are able to understand concepts. I want to play music, but I can't. Perhaps I will take some later. But the concept of music, and in music there is this idea of the contrapunto, where suddenly there's the basic staccato, allegro, and so on. So the merging and the alertness and the contra composition. So this is applicable to reading. So when we read something, there is a way in which we understand things in terms of how we challenge the statement of the meaning. And this is where the museum comes in. The museum is not just an abode or building, but it challenges us. But coming back to the actual question, the building itself. When we talk about the museum, I'm fascinated by building. I just don't come to the museum and see artifacts. I'm awed by the form, the abode of the building, the dwelling, the concept of the built structure of museums. And the built structure of museums is as much as important as what's inside. And this is where I know what's important here is also, I hope that this discourse is picked up in Malaysia. It's nothing new. It has been around in the West for decades. But here, some of you are taking museum studies in your school, but the idea, the discussion about museums have not been relayed to the public. And occasionally you have talks by curators. But these talks by curators are about museum excellence. It's not about museum themselves. It's not about museum as architecture. Because the architecture of museums are as important. Architecture of museums symbolize the power of the organizer or the convener of the museum. If you look at, for example, a simple one, the famous British Museum. What does the British Museum conjure? What's the image of when you hear the term British Museum? You see this columns, this perhaps I think Georgian architecture, the columns, and the facade of the museum, which reflects a time of power, of colonialism, of extension, of imperialism. So it conjures that extension of Britannia ruling the world. Of course, they are also thieves and robbers who rob everything that they see. But then it conjures the building itself, the architecture conjures the ideology of British colonizers, one of which is their fascination with collecting things. You go to the British Museum, some of you have gone there, you enter from the front, is the room on the right. You can Google. It's a huge room. I think the room is from one end to the other end, where it displays artifacts collected by British explorers, archaeologists, scholars, anthropologists, ethnologists, linguists, little things, beads, books, stones, skeletons, and this reflects the mind of the colonialists at the time, the curiosity.
The founder.
The founder, yeah, exactly. So, the building evokes a certain sense of power with regard to British extension, with regard to globalization, with regard to colonialism. That's one example. The other example, if you go to Korea, Seoul, the museum is ultra postmodern, very much. it's not like the normal Gothic or Georgian type. It's not like the Bauhaus.
No.
I think it's Georgian, but I'm not sure. I suppose it's after that period. This is
Tak berani. Ada bakal arkitek yang
okay, 19. I don't know. Sorry, it's the era has passed. This is 1930. So
yeah, 1940s.
Yeah. So it's different form of architecture. Perhaps at the time the emergence of the Bauhaus, but still it endures that. But the Seoul Museum, it has Seoul, the Korean Museum. Again, it evokes a new nation. It evokes a new nation, and a very modern nation. That was there. The museum was just constructed, so that's one. I look at Muzium Negara, 1960. 1961 or early 60s. It tries to portray Malaysia, the architecture of Malaysia, multicultural facade,
birth of a nation,
and the concretization of perhaps the Malay house. It is manifestation, the building, and we look at also museums in Singapore, very colonial in nature. So all these evoke a sense of power and authority and dominance, and also ideology. So the building itself is important, and this also, we talk about the other side of it. You go to Muzium Negara. Beside Muzium Negara, there is this space called Malay Ethnological Museum, which is a disappointment. It reflects the attitude of the conveners, the organizers.
That mean is the building or the management?
The building itself. The building reflects that. One couldn't care less with regard to the aesthetics of the building, the power of the building, and the significance of architecture, which is as much similar to the significance of the content of the building. So again, museum as building, as architecture, and the built environment.
What about museum as a living space?
This is so not
because the living space can be in contradiction to its the symbolic value of the building or the historical connotations of the building. It may be, some contrapuntal juga kan? Maybe a counterpoint to that historical significance. So maybe we want to get rid of the historical significance and come up with a new narrative. So to do that, maybe some museums like Singapore, they don't really demolish the old building. They work with the old building and turn it into a highly complex contemporary buildings with high-tech facilities without destroying the old one. So for me, that's quite interesting also, and making it and turning it into something like a living museum.
There are two ways to look at living museum. One is existing places. For example, a simple example is perhaps so simple as Sarawak Cultural Village. You can see it as a living museum. Some will say that Georgetown, as per its heritage status, will be a living museum, looking into the continuity of the beginning of the place. So it's place and sense making. It's place making actually. It's place making in terms of the interactions of people looking at it as if. See, this is again a Eurocentric concept, condescending upon non-white peoples as if white peoples do not develop and do not evolve. There's no change. So the idea of living museum subconsciously evokes this idea or this attitude that non-whites do not change. Non-whites are static. So it's a contradiction in terms, actually.
Sometimes it can be a Disneyland also.
It can be a Disneyland.
It's a staged environment.
Exactly.
Where the people who are practicing actually are just actors.
Exactly.
That can be a critique of the concept of living museum.
Exactly.
But what about living museum as in relation to particular, tangible cultural heritage, some rituals, some practices that you need to retain, which is very central in our cosmology that we want to continue. So, in order to do that, we have to make sure that, for example, a particular village still retain that. So that can be also living museum, kan?
Exactly. Yeah. When you say this, I was imagining the sites, the paddy fields, that continuity between Sebuah and Kedah. That's heritage. That visual is heritage, and it's a living museum.
Yeah.
The paddy fields and the people working on it, the paddy and its activities, these are living museum.
Yeah.
Albeit a manner in which we have to be very alert in how we see it. I don't want to say we are all any Europeans, no, we are all Asians. We come from Asia, the continent that has troubled Europe in many ways. The term traditional is itself could be false, because tradition is a category that was conjured when Europe began to feel modern, to be modern, the invention of modernity. With the invention of modernity, 1700.
So it's a part of a modern project, modernist.
It is a part of when modernity was invented. See, from early modern, we talk of periodization. Early modern means about 16th century. Okay? Early modern, middle modern, 18th century, late modern, 20th century. Now it's post-modern. We're looking at that periodization. When Europe invented modernity, the discourse in Europe, they also invented tradition.
Yeah.
And we, in our sleepwalking capacity or subconsciousness, consume that as tradition. In other words, we ourselves templated our being based on the European idea of development and define what is not modern as tradition.
Okay.
To me, that's a false dichotomy.
Maybe they invented the definition of tradition.
Yeah.
But if I refer back to my guru, Mesej,
Yeah.
who actually is a strong critic of modernist paradigm, tradition has nothing to do with the definition given by the Western paradigm. Our tradition speaks about timelessness, which is anti-history. In a way, it is non-linear. It is not about. This is what the term used by Mesej, Aristotelian lineology.
Yeah.
If you are trapped in that, because history is Western concept of history is very linear.
Yeah.
So anything in the past is considered as a relic, old.
Yeah.
But Eastern concept of history, even the name history, is sejarah. Sejarah means from Arabic sajaratun, which means a tree. A tree doesn't look like a linear thing, but it's fractal and cyclical. So it's interesting that Datuk mentioned about living field, living museum can be an extension of that concept of tradition. Maknanya tradition itu satu yang beku instead of something yang integral in our even in contemporary life, kan?
Exactly.
So in that case, sometimes living museums can be a way of extending this Western punya penjajahan minda. Can we look at it that way?
Yes, living museums are part of this imperialist ethos that has developed in the last 200 years, looking at the dichotomy between modernity and tradition. To the European mind, to the collectors in the British Museum room, and they also mentioned that, the mind of the collector, something like that. The non-European ethos, the non-European cosmology is tradition, primitive, backward. And therefore, if we look at the pedophils as a backward, primitive tradition, then we are imposing that imperialist view of ourselves. We are looking at from the other lens.
Western lens.
Yes. So, but if we look at the pedophils as a landscape that is non-Aristotelian, non-linear, then we are synthesizing our lives, and most of us do not live in paddy fields, but we look upon paddy fields and paddy production as integral to our cosmos, transcending the dichotomy between modernity and tradition. I think this is very important for scholars, and all of you, I would say, are scholars in terms of how we look at. I understand that many of you are from China.
Some, okay. The online one.
Okay.
The online
one. No, here.
Maybe not here, but
Okay.
the online one.
China has a very good tradition, or rather, I use the tradition in a different sense, of countering
Western narrative?
Countering Orientalism. Orientalism, Eurocentrism, and the narrative that has been imposed upon themselves by the others over the last 200 years. In other words, China has developed a way of looking at the West. It's sometimes categorized as Chinese Occidentalism, and therefore, in terms of the intellectual level, at the policy level, at the popular level, China is on par, want to stay on par with the West, so also with Japan. So in that sense, how we counter, when you look at, say, terms like tradition, for example, or the past, how we counter that value that has been imposed upon us, how we counter a Eurocentric, sometimes romanticized value of ourselves. Like, for example, when the British came to Pulau Pinang, when the West came to the Belian Archipelago, 1700, they would describe, for example, the people at the time, 1700, as wild, noble savage. And the word they use in some of the narratives, wild native fishermen. The word wild and native is a reflection of the image of the English in their encounters with the wilderness in Scotland. And during the romantic period, you have this idea of the paradise that the Russian call it Belvedere, I think, or Belvedere, macam Belvedere Bungalow, the paradise. So again, they look upon the paradise that's outside their image, wild and free. So again, these are the things that when you read the narratives, we have to be alert about how we are described by them.
Okay, I can't help but having to, see this paradox lah kan, because the whole, kalau kita take off from museum as a building, as elaborated by Dato' tadi, and museum as a living museum, we can't help but putting ourselves in a paradox. Paradox tu maksudnya saya begini, saya gunakan tamu malu-malu dan segala museum ini sendiri. So museum ini sendiri ada baggage kolonial. I mean, we cannot deny that. Of course, I observe what's happening in museums all over the world, because now, of course, with this kind of thinking, people are questioning these colonial legacies all over the world, and they are, like destroying statues, vandalizing museums, and asking museums to return back all their loots back to Africa, back to Asia, things like that. Do we go into that extreme, or do we still retain that significance of a building without changing the historical fact, but maybe perhaps changing the interpretation, or the way we interpret the narrative should be probably rewritten? Can it be like that? Supaya people aware of the historical significance, but not just simply subscribe to apa yang Datuk cakap tadi lah.
Yes. One of the reasons why I suggested this title is to create the consciousness among Malaysian policymakers of the significance of museums.
Okay.
I've been engaging with, in some ways, with certain museums, and the point here is Malaysia needs a new narrative.
Okay.
Malaysian museums, therefore, need a new narrative to reflect that new narrative.
Okay.
And the museums, in terms of the building, also need a new narrative. In fact, new buildings.
Okay.
We cannot store our past or our present or what we think in the future in colonial buildings. This is one comment that we have to make. Yeah, USN has been, Minden, military camp.
Yes.
In fact, the name Minden is also, doesn't matter. I mean, we cannot change everything in the world.
They should know also because they are coming here, they're studying here.
Yeah, this is a military barrack.
Yeah.
One of the most strategic places on the island. It's very strategic because before the British used this piece of land, this topography, the Malays were here earlier. And this was called, you told me many years back, Bukit Tok Jeratun, Bukit Datuk Jeratun, because this was the highest point on this campus, just in front of the museum, actually. And this is where the Malays came and settled, and was facilitating the Sultan of Kedah in terms of military strategy and so on. So this was the highest point. And on a clear day, you can see after Pulau Juja, you can see the mainland. You can see Bukit Bertajam, you can see Gunung Jai. In fact, before we have all these buildings blocking your way, you can see half of Penang, the eastern half of Penang from this hill. So, and the British noticed that, so they took over. I think Minden was after 1914, after 1918, 1920. Minden, I'm not sure. It was here during the First World War. It was called Minden Barracks. Minden is a place in Germany that signifies the I think the collaboration between the French and the British and the Germans. The first time, they were enemies, the British, Germans and the French were traditional enemies. You look at the history of Europe, there was no unity. That's why they formed the European community. Over many hundreds of years, they were at war with one another. There was this 100 years war, 30 years war. And you know, in the Malay Archipelago, we don't have such wars. But they brought in their wars to South Asia. We are the attacker for their wars. We are the extension. For example, in 1824, the Dutch were the rivals of the British. They divided the Straits of Malacca into two, 1824 and 1826. 1824 exchange between Malacca and Bangunan. You remember the history? No, we don't. 1826, the spheres of influence will change. So, coming back to the building here, the building, I think, so this is where, the Muslim place in USM. My suggestion, I think we should throw a discourse, we should create a discourse where all buildings of museums, housing museums in Malaysia, must be reassessed and re-evaluated. Living museum negara as such, but we take this museum, I'm talking about national museums, basically. Museum Penang. Are very colonial, and they want to portray still their colonial narrative. They want to have the statue of Francis Light. I think now it's Fort Cornwallis.
I don't know, they just...
and then they put it at the High Court complex. At one time they put it in front of the museum, now under renovation. And all museums, all state museums in Malaysia must look into that. Even the National Museum, I think after 65 years, my age, I'm 65 years old. After 65 years of nation building, we need to relook at how we position ourselves visually and in terms of architecture. Our architecture must be brave and bold. You know, Malaysians, I'm not an architect, I mean, perhaps architect will say I'm talking nonsense. But we look at other countries, they have bold architecture. architecture, bold designs. Even I'm talking about, say, in Japan, for example, go to Osaka, go to Japan, of course, in Madrid and in Barcelona. I mean, but architecture is as a result of the reflection of the society. But here, again, I know there are good architects, but their clients are not brave enough. But my point is this, that we want to portray national identity. If you want to portray national culture, you want to portray the ethos of nation building, then we need to start from the building itself, the design of museums, the architecture, the form of museum, because the form itself is content. It's nothing from Bangunan. Medium is the message. The building itself is the medium. And it conveys the message. The building communicates. The building itself is an extension of society, extension of man, extension of a complex value. We cannot house, for example, there's a poor, I mean, we talk about architecture, one which is to be, it's for an architect, it's taste and aesthetics. A good building does not impose on us. Some buildings impose, that's bad. Okay? But good buildings invite you to come in. And we find that some museums, they are buildings, yes, but they evoke bad architecture. They evoke a very static kind of how things are. For example, I'm thinking of the Muzium Kedah in Ustaz.
Muzium Kedah.
Muzium Kedah.
Kolonial building also.
Yeah, it's Muzium Kedah. It's
yang baru.
Yang baru. And then the museum in Perak. The museum in Perak, you go to Ipoh. It's former bungalow, whatever.
Muzium Diraja.
Muzium
Perak in Taipei.
And also in Taipei, there's a Perak Museum. Perak Museum is very colonial. Perak Museum, I think we have to understand that this is where it stores colonial knowledge. And you want to learn about colonial knowledge, you want to learn about how they think of us, you go to the Perak Museum. Not the museum itself. Yes, the building has historical value, but the library in the museum, the collection, and the collection, the material, the books are part of the museum itself.
Taxonomy.
Taxonomy, exactly. And we have books and the materials which are about 200 or 300 years old.
Which is I think is okay because as you said, we want to know about the colonial history, we can go there.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a place like here, I always feel like at the end of the day, we will end up making a simulacrum of something that is supposed to be a living space, like this construction, or that we call it a sustainable village, which is actually a simulacrum of a village, a coastal village and coastal lifestyle. So it becomes very postmodern in a way because the building is colonial, which is totally different, with different way of looking, colonial gaze of our tradition. So we are still within that building. Kita dibumbui oleh satu bangunan yang mencadangkan penguasaan pandangan kolonial terhadap tradisi. Dan saya macam berlawan dengan itu. Kalau saya masuk building ni, di sini lah utamanya. Sebab itu saya namakan Gelanggang Kosmologi itu satu cara untuk saya berdialog dengan building ini. Saya tak boleh runtuh dia sebab dia historical. Saya boleh ganggu dan membuat orang sedar bahawa dia ada dan dia sebenarnya mengganggu kosmologi itu. Saya tak boleh buat dia neutral. Macam mana tu Dato'?
Exactly. You're fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Sebab kita macam ni saya bagi contoh Dato', also to our students. That artifact there is a part of an arch. Apa dipanggil bahasa Melayu dia dipanggil gerbang for you to enter. But it doesn't look like that in an actual setting. Now we put it together in an arch which is a part of a colonial building, a very Western concept of a building. So we have two different types of arch coexisting, which for me as an artist is a very postmodern reflective kind of installation. Pastiche, there you go, so it becomes pastiche. It is not that. Itu bukan keadaan yang sebenar. The actual setting should not be like that. So each actually is having a dialogue with each other. Each is actually maybe you can call sabotaging each other or making fun of each other. But each actually making aware of many things, the history of our nation, part of our colonial past, and then how that colonial past in a way sudah melupuskan certain kind of paradigm yang embodied by that. So saya perlu ada naratif yang membuatkan that allows the pengunjung to be aware that I cannot change it.
Yeah.
I cannot change this setting to become Malay or something like that.
But you're playing a very critical role in terms of how you counter the narrative continuously, and making known that this museum or under your curatorship or directorship and this place are always countering the narrative.
Yes,
it's such an unfortunate way of doing it in terms of we are the victims of that narrative.
Yeah, and especially masa curate Datuk punya show. Your show, during your show, because we put up all your essays. Of course, there are sub-themes of essays, but predominantly it's post-colonial framework, looking back at our colonial history. So I can't help it but to make people aware that as they are reading your essays, they are in the building of a system or a thinking structure that you were commenting upon in your essays.
Exactly.
So, pasal kita tak boleh ubah dia kan, kita tak boleh pecahkan bangunan tu, but we can make people aware. Sama juga macam statue. You know, you can put Francis Light, tak kisah, saya takkan hancurkan dia. Tapi the narrative about Francis Light tu, we need to allow people to give their interpretation, the reading of Francis Light kan.
Exactly, interesting. Francis Light, I want to mention one thing. In actual life, when Francis Light came to this part of the world, 1770, he died in 1794. Most of the time he was wearing a songkok, baju Melayu and kain belekat. One way to display in the museum is get him to wear a songkok.
Oh, that would be nice. I would love to do that.
That would be counter narrative.
I would love to do that. It is factual? What you say this stuff? Memang dia pakai baju
Yes, it is factual.
Ada evidence. So
it
will be interesting.
The narrative from Phuket. They because he was staying in Phuket for some years. So the people, Malaysian historians, they don't dare write this. We think that we are duped by the past. We are duped by the honor of Francis Light. Actually, Francis Light was Malay. His DNA is Malay. He was not European. He has been outside of the European cultural life for 23 years. Imagine if he was here for 23 years in a different culture, a different climate, different interaction. Do you think he was wearing the Georgian costume every day? Of course not. If he were to wear that, how can he become friends with the Malays and become, how can he interact or perhaps have affairs with Malay ladies? So again, he was a Malay. He wrote Jawi. He reads Jawi, and he speaks Malay, and he wore a belekat. That's it. It's a fact. Baju Melayu and songkok. So DNA, cultural-wise, is Malay. So again, it would be good if yourself, this museum, were to display and create that tension. So, in that one, maybe I don't know whether I'm playing a moderator or provocateur, agitator. Interestingly enough, the students, we established a program called Fine Art Program, and Fine Art by itself is an extension. You can call it an extension of the Western tradition. The word canon that you use, the canon of Western historicism and Western modern art.
And we are actually inheriting that, probably unquestionably, and dengan taat setia.
Yeah, this is
What is your response?
our view of art history is always Western. The idea of aesthetics is European.
Yeah.
When we study that, even we say that okay, there is Islamic aesthetic. I think we have not broken up that paradigm. It's always European.
So this will be considered as craft, utilitarian craft,
Yeah.
and painting over there will be considered as high art.
Yeah.
This is low art, craft, and that is high art.
Yes, exactly.
So that kind of superficial for me dichotomy is the one that I enjoy deconstructing. But somehow, for some sectors of people who uphold to that probably would not like it. So what do you think about that? Adakah itu nakal ataupun subversif ataupun patut digalakkan?
You see, again, you break the contrapuntal rule.
Yeah.
Contrapuntal reading of culture, history, and tradition. To the Europeans, this is tradition.
Yeah.
When you look at the high point of European art, for example, it will be during the time of the Enlightenment. This French period. So that was in terms of talking about both visual and oral music. But again, that's a European tradition, not ours. We cannot extend it to us. If we do extend it to us, then we become brown skin in a white mask. Or
that's one of the ways that I don't know, in a naughty way or what, I don't know. Of course, with Afghanistan, is to, as you can see over there, we have a drawing, which is very Western tradition. We are aware of that. It came from Western figurative tradition. But we put it together with the bakul, which is a part of our collection also.
Okay.
And that bakul, of course, language-wise, system-wise, is not complementary to the Western tradition. So there are two different languages talking in one scene.
Yeah.
And I like to do that in order to sort of dissolve that contradiction antara Western modernism dengan Eastern cosmology. So that's our strategy lah. So pada pandangan Datuk, okay lah. We can call it fancy as some people will say it's intertextual, but that's probably one of the many ways that we can figure out on how we can put together our collections. Our collections are also contradictory. One of which is an extension of our repository of our heritage, our cultural objects. Some of which represent rituals that are dead already. So macam mana kita nak bawa dia keluar? Adakah kita nak asingkan dia ikut anthropological ataupun kita nak tukar dia jadi something yang masih sama tetapi dalam konteks yang contemporary. So macam mana kita?
This can also be seen from a Western artist who would also do the same thing.
Installation,
a reflection of what you've done. In terms of how they would want to look at their own culture and how they want to interact with others.
Yeah.
So it's looking at it's othering one another. In one frame.
So Oriental and Occidental berlakang sebentar.
In one frame.
Yeah.
So it's not only peculiar to our perspective, but it also happened from a European and American artist when they look at the other, and the other would be I would put it as what you call the non-enlightened, primitive, other. That condescending view lingers on. We can say that now when these Americans or Australians say that they are multicultural, it's fake. Multiculturalism doesn't work. It has failed in Australia, in America, and in Britain. That condescension, a collective condescension and individual is still there. it's reflective in their culture and in their relations with us.
So, katalah, okay, one of the things that you wrote in your synopsis again, museum as which is very interesting. Museum as an extension of power, maybe like state ideological apparatus, determining what to be seen, what to be discussed, what are allowed to be discussed, discoursed, what are not allowed to be discussed. But you also mentioned that it can also be subversive to that. So can you elaborate on that? It can be like, I'm not going to follow this master narrative, maybe I can come up with a different narrative.
I think this is where we see the potential challenge in Malaysia.
Okay.
We need that counter-narrative. We have a museum of national history, the Padang Merdeka, many years back.
Okay.
But because of the apathy, but because of this fear perhaps to tweak our history, not to tweak our history, but to reinterpret our history. I've been careful with my words. We're not changing the past, but we are reinterpreting, perhaps revise the past. It's perhaps it's dismantled. So the dismantling of the Museum of Natural History, national history to me is more than stopping the display. It's stopping that narrative of national history from evolving.
Okay, when we say narrative, then the next question would be whose narrative? Because now we are at probably like a junction. We don't know where are we heading. I don't know, economically, politically, value system based, maybe educationally. It's like where are we heading? It's like a state of limbo. We don't know. So how do we decide on what narrative that we want to?
Yeah, good question. Very difficult. Very difficult question.
People have many different narratives. They're clashing now.
Yeah. When I say our narrative, I mean the narrative of the peoples in Malaysia.
Okay.
I mean the national narrative, and the narrative of those who are conscious that they are part of the nation. They're citizens of the nation state. That they embrace are loyal to its institutions. I'm not talking about loyal to political parties. They can kick out political parties. Who cares? I mean, these are the political parties are different. Loyalty means loyalty
Tanah air.
To the Tanah air, not the Tanah air, but to the Tanah air. To the idea of the nation state, to the idea of the nation. When you see, when we talk about nation, I took this qualification. Malaysia is a nation state, but to understand Malaysia as a nation state, one has to look beyond the political boundaries of Malaysia. One has to look at Malaysia in the context of the Malay archipelago. What we call, sometimes we call Nusantara, that's the Javanese way of looking at the archipelago, or the Pulau Melayu. But looking at in the context of the Malay archipelago, would tell you the semantics, would tell you the history, would inform you of the geography of Malaysia, both as a region, as a rantau, and as well as a nation state. The first time that the word Malaysia came about from within the country of South Asia was in the Philippines in about 1860s or 1870s, Jose Rizal. The Filipinos were the first in relation to this to claim that they are Malaysian. They are part of Malaysia, they are Malays. Malaysia, as in terms of nation state, officially came about in 1963. The idea of Malaysia as a nation state was born in late 1940s from Ghazali Shafi'i. So again, and also the idea of Malaysia, where Malaysia means Malay means Malay. Sia in Greek means island of the Malays, was described by French, German explorers in the 1600s. In these maps, you can find the word Malaysia. So, and this has been used. So, in order to understand Malaysia as a nation state, as what we are here now, then you've got to understand that early narrative that appears in maps, appears in descriptions, and appears in the subconsciousness of the peoples at the time over the last few hundred years. Then only we understand what we mean by narrative. But coming back in the modern sense, and this is political, the national narrative collapsed in 2018.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, when we talk about national narrative, we take the point of independence in 1967. From 1957 to 2018, we have one national narrative. Unquestioned, unsubjugated, openly, unchallenged, whether we like it or not, it's a national narrative, but there are variations to it, but that's a national narrative. Okay? The mainstream of the nation was more or less intact. Although there are criticisms, there are people who may oppose it, but the mainstream was intact. Come after May 9, 2018, it collapsed until now.
Yeah.
That's why we are in this ring.
Yeah.
Our historical consciousness, the national story, when we talk about narrative story, the national story is not certain.
So, okay, my fancy term, my ego, I call it under deconstruction. Under deconstruction, which, so I don't know what will be the next construction.
Yes.
So still under deconstruction. So but if we subscribe to this postmodern take, it will be in a state of permanent under deconstruction, which means that we're not going to have any kind of shared narrative.
Yes.
So when it comes to narrative, I would see it as two. Two are the timeless qualities, intangible one, and the other one would be the tangible one. The tangible one would be contingent to time. So when it comes to time, then Malaysia, 10 years old Malaysia is different than 60 something years old Malaysia. So 10 years old Malaysia narrative cannot be used for 50 years old Malaysia or 60 years old Malaysia.
Yes.
So that's why I say in terms of the tangibility may be changing. But I would like to ask Dato, what would be shared? What would be something that we can use as our common denominator? Intangible things that are timeless, that we can share, that we can say, okay, we share this. What would that be?
I'm always opposed to the idea of the nation state.
Okay.
My mind is always contingent in terms of the nation state has deconstructed and nullified the national narrative. See, the point here is that it may be politically it would be correct to say that the national narrative began in 1957. But the national narrative, you look at the existence of our nation, the existence of this part of the world, it has been around for a few thousand years. From the point of time where we know people interact, people come in, their activities. The national narrative should be more than 2,000 years old.
So that means,
not 65 years.
So that means the region itself, can it be said that the region itself is an amalgamation of many influences? Like from, can it be said?
One way to look at it is the region and the nation. It's amalgamation of a number of civilizations.
Yeah.
So these civilizations came, they converge, and they are converged by the monsoons.
Okay.
We are the most cosmopolitan people in the world.
Okay.
I'm not saying this because I like to say this.
Yeah.
We are more cosmopolitan than the Europeans. See, when Malacca was its height, Europe was in the so-called Dark and Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Nobody goes to Europe. Nobody went to Genoa, London, Amsterdam. They were primitive. Venice was dependent on Malacca.
Europe was theocentric probably?
Also, exactly, you're right, theocentric. At that time, the Catholic Church was holding power and monopolizing daily life. You can't even talk about these things in the European University at that time. Because the padre would come and shoot you. So, it's only when the Catholic Church collapsed in about 1560s, 1570s that Europe began to be open. becomes more there was Protestantism.
Yeah.
It developed an open culture. Before that, the culture was controlled by the church. So again, when you talk about openness, we are cosmopolitan, and we have been cosmopolitan over the last 2,000 years. In terms of our interaction, when you talk about our, I mean the peoples in this region, the Peninsula and South Asia, and the Malay Archipelago. We've been interacting with the Mediterranean, even during the time of the Roman Empire through the Arabs, who sailed from Hadramaut across the Indian Ocean to the Arabian Sea, to the peninsula between now North Kedah to Bangkok, and across to Vietnam and China. That was the cosmopolitanism that we had. But this cosmopolitanism, plus also the idea of the fluid idea of merantau, which makes the tanah air. Okay? The rantau and merantau. Now we change it to migration, which is wrong. There's no equivalent term for merantau and rantau. The belief between rantau and merantau is a term or practice by the Minangkabau. No, it's by all the peoples in the Malay Archipelago. So the narrative, the story of the merantau, which makes the tanah air, was also destroyed by the imperial powers. So these are the things that make us cosmopolitan, and the interaction between the peoples, the maritime peoples in the Malay Archipelago, with the people from the subcontinent, with the people from China, and China through the Nanahai trade from the Port Amoy right down to Straits of Malacca to Africa, has been around for at least 1,000 years plus. Yeah. And Chenghu was quite recent in history. Yeah. There was this Nanhai trade. So again, this trade and this interaction has brought in conjured the cosmopolitanism of this region. So in a sense, that narrative, that story should be stretched over the last 2,000 years, not stopped and beginning a new narrative in 1957. The problem here is that when we talk about global relations, when we talk about new nation states, new nation states in Asia, in China, in Africa or South America are supposed to have a new story, a new history after they quote-unquote achieve their independence. The narrative itself is false. A new nation state, new independence. What are we talking about? We are not independent before 1957. So that structure, we need to deconstruct it. And again, the structures of the nation state has eroded and destroyed relations among us. So one of the things that in a small way, when I meet the foreign ministry people, we had some meetings, foreign ministry. Malaysia must develop itself and conceive itself as a civilizational state. Okay. And this is where I think we need to build on civilizational state, not the nation state. Europe, to some extent, has built up that nation state, which is a new phenomenon over the last 300 years, to the European community. Now the war in Ukraine is about civilizations. Not so much about, it's about, because the civilization of Europe is trying to be extended to Ukraine. China has announced itself as a civilization state. This was about 50 years back. So regardless of what's happening to China, whether we agree or not, but again, the Chinese has created a retrospective story to their history. I've written it in one of my columns. But China is seen, and they see themselves as a civilization state, which to some extent may be detrimental to us, because they would want to expand their borders into South Asia. Therefore, we in Malaysia and in the region must counter it, also considering ourselves as a civilization state.
Because, I'm not good at this, but I'm just throwing out. As an officer, not an expert, whatever is going to happen or is happening, we have to take into account the geopolitical context surrounding our world today, which can be depressing lah. I mean, sometimes I also thought sort of tak nak ambil tahu, tapi we need to ambil tahu. So we have this China, we have US and Europe, and then we have to position ourselves politically, economically, socially. We have to make decision in terms of positioning ourselves, and that includes the narratives. Our narratives have to take into account what's going on geopolitically. It's not like we are living in isolation. So no matter how.
This way, our museum will be reflective of.
But now, even to be fair to the students, you say that national narrative 2018. I would say that when it comes to the narratives of modern art or contemporary art or fine art in Malaysia, 2010 dah habis lah, tak ada lah. I mean, I wrote an essay called modern contemporary art in Malaysia after 1990, okay, which is at that time probably at the tail end. But I stopped at 2010, and after that, it's very difficult for you to come up with a kind of a map on master narrative that the students can refer to. So after 2010, there seems to be like so many silos, and there's no bigger map. So not only in terms of national narrative, but in terms of the art, when it comes to the narratives of the art, also seems to be, I mean, for the lack of a better word, ada deconstruction. Tapi kalau lama sangat ada deconstruction ni tak boleh juga kan.
What happened then after 2010?
Okay, one example in terms of a tangible form, we have a national art gallery, but we don't have a national art gallery that presents a timeline of Malaysian art history. Maybe now they have lah, baru kan. So we don't have that setting in a permanent way. So before this, when I was a student, I can go to the National Gallery, I can see the timeline, so that I can see the presenter and everything. So I can contextualize my practice within what happened before, in terms of the style, ideology, thinking, whatever. So now, as if the students are practicing without any context at all, because you don't have that map. Anything after 2010 probably. And now, with not only that, which brings me to the next question. Now, in the age of AI, metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality, the idea of physicality itself sudah mungkin lupus. So what do you think about that? With that coming in, again, maybe national narrative ini menjadi sesuatu yang will be much more difficult when it comes to metaverse, for example. So what do you think about that? This is the world that they're going to be entering, and they are, as we are talking, it is being developed and so on. AI, especially, look into it. It is scary. So we are having this discourse, but at the same time, we have this new paradigm which would probably totally erase everything. So macam mana tu Datuk sekarang kita nak menghadapi situasi dan cabaran begini that will be faced by our kids ni, kan?
Sama kan?
Oh, I mean like
that's what I mentioned.
Kalau modern kata apa tu, everything becomes kata simulation.
Yeah, simulation. Yeah.
Simulacra. Ini total immersion je, total simulacra kan.
Yeah.
So macam mana tu Datuk? What is the fate of the museum? How do we respond to that?
That's why we go back to the axiom. The media is the extension of man. The medium, coming back to the medium, is the message.
Yeah, now the medium is not physical, but the medium is virtual.
Yeah, the medium is the message, and the media is the extension of man.
Yeah.
In other words, we are led to the question of what is authenticity.
Yeah.
What is the mirror? I mean, as I say, the polished mirror. Our existence is dependent on the mirror of ourselves. So, we look at the after 1986. I would take 1986 as the year that the internet emerges.
Yeah.
Which created a whole media environment. In the 1990s, 1990s, in the media school, we talk about a media-rich environment. Suddenly, we are immersed in the media. It's no more rich. We are drowned in the media. So, since 1996, early on it was quite primitive, but now we have the social media. We have everything that we know. We are online 24 hours a day. So, the media is our extension. And based on the classic Marshall McLuhan, the media is the extension of our nervous system. And what we see in the social media, how we interact with social media. I'm not a good user of social media. I don't consume so much as my kids and as all of you. I'm a laggard. But if you look at these things, it's a reflection of us. So our narrative will be much mediated by this new environment.
By algorithm.
By algorithm, yes.
But
exactly.
Our narratives are actually influenced by algorithm.
Exactly. And
by a programmer.
Exactly. And this is where I think the year 2018 we find that the national narrative is deconstructed. And you said it is under construction.
Under deconstruction.
Under deconstruction. Under deconstruction. Under deconstruction.
No, sedang.
Sedang. Okay. Okay. So it will go on like this. It will continue in that state for some time, perhaps, or perhaps in perpetuity, with regard to the challenges that we have in ourselves. And in the nation being extended by the media and being mediated by the media. So the media here is not the traditional media as we think of, but it extends to the mechanics that makes the media, including AI, of course, algorithm, which may not be the actual reality of what we want. So again, we question what is the real story. What is the real story? What is truth? Let's say about post-truth, relative truth. But again, when I talk about the national story, we can question about the truth of the national story, and it makes our effort more difficult.
Saya bila Datuk ajak saya buat orang tanah air, okay, the word for me, the word that resonates in me is home. Home. And when we are under deconstruction, we are homeless. And I felt that sometimes. I'm not a millennial generation, but my daughters are. This sense of homelessness, having no sense of belonging, having no sense of belonging, may affect our mental health. It is affecting mental health. If we look at the data in terms of mental health among the young people especially, it is scary. Our index sejahtera kita after COVID is much even worse. So we are not healthy mentally. We are rakyat Malaysia adalah rakyat yang tidak sehat secara mental. No wonder macam-macam dalam media sosial tu kan. Itu just reflection je. But the data show that the situation is quite critical, especially among the students. And one of which, of course, this is not based on research, it's just my hypothesis. No sense of belonging, no sense of home. Sebab tu bila Datuk ajak saya buat tanah air tu, immediately brings me back to the idea of we have to look at what is the meaning of tanah air, belonging, where that we share. Exactly. So where do we go back to? Exactly. Even if it is virtual. Tak kisahlah virtual, but where is this even in the virtual time space that we can say, okay, I'm home.
See, at the personal level, when I began to verbalize tanah air, when I began to write about it, this is quite recent. Actually, when I 4 or 5 years back, when I started to think about it, it conjures. Not 5 years back, about maybe 10-15 years ago. It conjures a sense of security. It began when I was moving back and forth across the archipelago, more or less. I was flying from there to Sumatera to Java. I was traveling, and recently I took a boat ride from Port Dickson to Jumaat across the Strait of Malacca, and from there I took a road across the Sumatra. So over the 3 years, when I was traveling or romping in the archipelago, I felt a sense of belonging. I felt a sense of security. I don't know about others, but this is initially at the intellectual level, at the personal level, and I elevated it to the intellectual level with regard to my narrative, my stories and articles and books on the origins, on the genealogies, and on the nation. But I see that perhaps in the younger generation, we have been altered by virtual geographies. My idea of geography is very traditional. I would argue that with my wife. My idea of geography is when I want to go to a place, I will look at landmarks. That's it. I don't use Google or Waze. But my other half would use Google or Waze, even it's 1 kilometer from the place.
Good for you.
And she would say that, oh, things have changed. New areas are opened up, new buildings came up. You cannot use old technology and the landmarks anymore. I mean, she's right. So again, and to the new generation, that's reality. That's home. Google is home. For example, my kids, I mean, they use maps. They use all kinds of maps, and that virtually is where they are. There's no loyalty, perhaps, to a place. There is no genius loci over there. There is no empathy or no passion to a physical place. I am one of those, perhaps few, accessing my ego, to have a very high consciousness of place, of a place. I can describe a place, I can feel a place, I can know that how secure or how I belong to or don't belong to a place. And that's why I wrote Gelanggang.
There's a new field. I just received some questions from PhD candidate. There's a new field called virtual ethnography.
Oh yes.
Saya pun wow. Kan? So then this fellow is under school or discipline of ethnography.
Yeah, yes.
And they have this virtual ethnography.
Yes.
Asking me questions about the fate of Islam and Muslim in a virtual environment, something like that.
Yeah.
So it is something that memang a bit scary, but I think we have also to reflect upon it also, kan?
Yeah, but I think this also resonates the opposite of it. Is I want to introduce you, maybe you know, Li Futuan. Li Futuan is a geography scholar. He was in Minnesota when I was a student there. I used to attend his public lectures.
Okay.
Li Futuan wrote a number of books, one of which is Space and Place and Topophilia. The sense of place, how we fear place or how we love place. So Li Futuan has much influenced me in my construct and my story and my intellectual life. He influenced me in my thesis. And is it how we make sense of space and place? How we make sense of architecture? He's a geographer, and because of him, geography was the number one field in America. My university, where geography is number one. This was in the early 80s.
Very interesting.
So you look up Li Futuan.
Geografi pun sekarang ni physical geografi also akan jadi lupus. Anyway, okay, I have to break to another section. So any question? Do you have any questions from anak-anak ni? Kalau dalam bahasa Melayu pun boleh. Ada question daripada online? Ada. Okay, saya bacakan questions daripada atas kalian ya. Okay. One question. Can I ask how to use our ego in art? That's one question. Another one from Ui. Should British Museum return stolen artifacts to Africa and Asia? This is the one. I'm sorry I brought it up because it's quite important, pertinent to museum as an institution, yeah? So institution of powers especially. Anyway, so dua tu ya. Satu, how you use ego in your art, And should British Museum send back or return back all their collections that they sort of quote stolen from Africa and Asia?
Yeah, thank you. The first one, if we don't have ego, we cannot produce anything. If we don't have ego, we cannot have an identity. So when I talk about ego here, I would mean at the individual level as well as at the collective level. So it is a sense of expression. It is a form of expression. It is a form of extending ourselves, to use that axiom, media as extension of man. Ego extends ourselves. It promotes our views. So again, when we talk about ego, there are two dimensions. One is the conscious use, or so-called ego. The other is the subconscious use. Yeah. Most of the time, perhaps we are subconscious. Yeah. All creative people, when they produce things, they are subconscious. It's an automatic creation. Not being deliberate, they just produce things. When scholars write, okay, when I write, for example, I'm not deliberate in terms of what I write. It's just the flow of ideas, the stream of thought, we call it the stream that comes, and I put it on paper. And when I speak, perhaps initially, I need to express my ego, but later, perhaps I will be subconscious what I do. But what is important here is that we are conscious whether we use the ego or whether the existence of the ego is a conscious existence or a subconscious existence. But nevertheless, we need to have that. When we talk about ego here, we have to be aware that God has the greater ego. We are mere mortals, but we are a reflection of His power.
Okay, right. I have my own answer on that, but I'm not the invited guest, so I'm not going to go into that, and I will go on and on and on anyway, because my perspective is from a quantum perspective. Anyway, another question yang tadi tu, patut ke British Museum hantar balik dan pulang balik segala harta koleksi yang mereka telah curi daripada Asia dan Afrika.
Yeah. Not only the British Museum, but other museums, other European museums. When the colonials came, when they sailed out of Europe in 1492, one of which is they came and they plundered. They are the thieves of history, thieves of time, thieves of culture, thieves of other material things. They plundered, they changed names, they stole identity, and so on. So one of the things they stole are artifacts. Apart from the non-tangible, they have stolen many non-tangible, non-material aspects of our lives.
In fact, the museum also was actually an extension of that project.
Exactly. So the museum is the house.
They call it muse.
Muse. The Greek god Muse, to amuse. Okay. Now when I say,
so should they hantar balik?
In the British Museum, there's a number of sections where they took, this Mesopotamian and Sumerian stone structures. It's this high, I think about 13, 14. Massive. And it's there. From the massive one to the smallest one. The smallest map in the world, this size. I wrote a piece, I can send you an article in Sumeria. Two things can be done.
Okay.
The artifacts that they stole, they have to acknowledge that they stole. They have to acknowledge that their museums are filled with stolen pieces. They robbed, they plundered, and they have to acknowledge. Some, to me, they should keep. You know why? I'm talking about manuscripts. Manuscripts and perishable materials, like paper and so on. Because I've been asked by that. This is when I looking for light letters in the British in Swiss, in London, and I think it was one question. Do you want this back? He asked me when I was. This was 2010 when I was looking at 11 volumes. I kept quiet, and then they led me to the mock. I said the mock where they kept all the original material in the cold room. I think the room was about maybe less than 5 degrees Celsius, 5 or 10 degrees Celsius, and even original maps of Albert Schweitzer. He was in school. Albert Schweitzer was this European doctor who went to Africa. He drew this original map, and they showed me photos and other materials from Malaysia also. And he asked me again, do you want this? This was at that time there are a number of initiatives to buy materials. I said no, you give it, because if we have it, I didn't tell them. If we bring it here, we are not good in maintaining those artifacts, preserving those artifacts. We don't have enough expertise. We don't have cold rooms. We don't have the initiative to preserve and conserve. Even you have, for example, 200-year-old books in the Perak Museum Library, Master 1821, left on the table. And virtually you can see the oxidation process. When the media saw that, I told them to keep in the. So I think that if we have the attitude at conservation and preservation, then we keep it. Okay? Otherwise, they keep it. The museums and the libraries in London and Leiden, I think they do a good job. I know the nationalists will attack me. Okay? But where other non-perishable things are concerned, like other stone artifacts and symbols of our culture, they should return. And they should announce the return of those. We should demand for it, and we should demand compensation, reparation and compensation from them.
That's another thing. Reparation in terms of environmental discussion also is an issue also among the so-called developed and undeveloped countries. So quite an interesting debate. Maybe let them do a 3D scanning of all those collections, and they keep the 3D data, and maybe the smaller parts, the smaller artifacts can be written back. But I agree with you that we have to ask whether they have the capacity to conserve and preserve, and the technologies as well as.
We don't have the capacity. We don't have the attitude. This is the problem. We want those things back, but we don't have the attitude.
But I think I do agree with that. In museum language we call it intervention, where we allow voice of dissent to also be included in the narratives. So meaning that as people are looking at a particular statue, we also have a different interpretation of it. So the voice of people who are claiming that it is stolen from them should also be included in the narrative of the exhibit, exactly the so-called interpretation.
Exactly.
So now the interpretation is sort of dominated by one particular, state kind of a narrative. So maybe that can be one solution, where all these voices can also be heard and included in the section.
Yeah, but where Malaysia is concerned, it's quite different from countries like, from peoples like the Maoris or Indonesia or other in the African continent. Because one of the things that they took was skeletons and skulls. Their ancestors, there are hundreds of Maori skeletons and skulls in Leiden and in European museums. So they would want this to be written, which is rightly so. Okay? Because these are their ancestors. These are human remains. And these human remains when they were brought there, they were dehumanized. You have heard stories of Africans being put in cages because they look different. So my point is that colonialism is dehumanizing, and it's against human rights. It's a crime. In other words, the whole process of colonialism is a crime. But because it was was committed during that time. We think that it's not a crime as much as it's as much as what is happening now. A crime is a crime. It should be punished. But there are not enough voices. Over the last decades, some voices, people write and to get reparation and so on, and states through their leaders have also asked European powers to apologize, make a public apology. But Malaysia has not done that, except for my book. To be out, well, it's supposed to be in the market 2 months back. But
which one was the title?
USM.
No, what's the title?
Avatar or something.
Oh, yeah, that's one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it should be out by December.
Okay.
But the year is 2023, not 20. I mean, the publication year is 2023. So in that book, I mentioned about reparation. I mentioned about redeeming.
Okay. I already plan to have this 1.5 hour, maximum 1.5 hour. Anybody from here nak tanya apa soalan? If you have any question, even questions yang mudah-mudah pun tak apa, kita boleh jawab.
All of you from the art school?
Mostly.
Mostly from the art school.
Siapa nak tanya? Anak-anak murid Dr. Ted. Daripada kelas apa ni?
These are my students. My name is Gelanggang. My students from final year project. They will be doing a final year exhibition next year. Probably upstairs and downstairs. And we also have students from integration and media and processes.
Okay.
And I brought them along because I feel that we are going to touch on measurement within medium as a message as part of our painting process.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any question on medium as a message? The medium itself is not neutral. It means that the medium itself has a message. It's not, if you use canvas is not neutral. Canvas itself can be a message. Kalau anda menggunakan kayu itu bukan sesuatu yang neutral, tetapi kayu itu sudah ada makna yang tertanam di dalamnya, cerita yang tertanam di dalamnya. Itu maksud medium as a message.
There's also another meaning, medium without message.
Ada
a message.
Juga. Tapi kalau ikut daripada metode itu, begitulah ya. Ada apa nak tanya? Ni peringkat degree kan mungkin. Tapi sepatutnya kalau buat degree itu sesuatu amalan itu harus diisi dengan kerangka teori. Maknanya dia tidak dibuat secara tiba-tiba jadinya kan. Itu beza antara diploma dengan ijazah. Sekiranya anda hendak mendapat ijazah, kalau anda membuat satu kerja studio, lukis, tapi tidak ada kerangka teori, tidak ada rujukan teori, tidak ada kefahaman dan kepastian teori, anda tidak layak mendapat ijazah, tapi boleh dapat satu lagi diploma, ekstra diploma. Selanjutnya begitulah. So perlu berjinak, tahu memang agak sukar, tapi perlu berjinak dengan teori. Setiap satu amalan yang kita buat itu perlu ada teori. Boleh? So ada apa nak tanya?
You have to dabble yourself with theory. Theory is not just an abstract notion. Theory is a tool. This is theory. This is theory. It's not just a technology. And you look at social movements. Any kind of revolution, most revolutions in this world, is a result of using theory as a tool and as a weapon. Theory and history come together. You look at the French Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, Chinese Revolution, 1939, Iranian Revolution, 1979. These are combination and use of history and theory as weapon. Karl Marx is a good example. Critical School is a good example. Frankfurt School.
Anyway, teori membantu kita memahami sesuatu fenomena. Kalau tidak kita macam orang yang tak perlu masuk universiti lah. Tapi mungkinlah kita perasan, kita ambil ijazah, kita pakai baju jubah warna ungu, kita ingat kita dah pandai. Sebenarnya tak layak. Kerana kita tidak boleh articulate dan explain dan memberi pencerahan kepada orang yang tak pergi ke dapat ijazah tentang sesuatu fenomena yang kita study. So kalau kita ada mengkaji sesuatu fenomena sebagai rujukan karya kita harus faham, mampu menggunakan teori untuk bantu kita menerangkan dan memberi pencerahan. Kalau tidak, kita tak perlu. Apa nak masuk universiti? Tak perlu. Jadi mereka yang bergraduat menggelarkan diri mereka sebagai graduat daripada universiti, walaupun mereka ijazah pertama, harus mempunyai pengetahuan teori untuk menerangkan tentang suatu fenomena kepada orang. Tak kisahlah politik ke, ekonomi ke, budaya ke. Okey? Alright. Bukan saya tahu. Tapi dia tak payah, saya tahu. So insyaAllah nanti kita berjumpa. Kalau tak tanya sekarang, tak apa. Dia berjumpa waktu assessment untuk mendapatkan menghasilkan pameran di sini. Setiap orang saya akan tanya teori. Kalau tidak dapat menjawabnya, maka anda tidak layak untuk mempamerkan karya tangan anda di Muzium di Galeri Tuanku Fauziah. Okey, kalau saya kata ada apa-apa, diam je. Maka bye-bye. Okey, maknanya kalau mereka nak membeli pameran di sini, saya akan menembual anda seperti mana saya menembual Datuk Rob dan juga kawan-kawan anda. Ingat ya, masa sini anda dulu beberapa orang saya tembual mereka dan mereka boleh articulate, boleh jawab dan belajar lah. Okey ya? Alright. Saya tengok semua macam takut je. Adakah kehidupan di universiti itu menakutkan? Ya, begitulah agaknya ya.
All the way from the art school, I was thinking that the people from the media school should be around. Media school, the communication school also. Because one of the things which I want to share is museum as communication. Museums as communication in terms of the extension of man. Because in a way it communicates a system of thought, the complexity of ideas. And the communication will start from when you know about the museum, when you walk into its architectural space, and when you interact with its holdings. So, in Malaysia, we count that by visitors. But I think we should change the concept. It's not museum visitors, it's museum audience. How audience consume the complex values and systems in the space of the museum.
We call it engagement.
Engagement, okay.
Audience engagement. It's not about numbers, but it's about audience engagement. So perhaps nanti you will learn a bit on audience engagement. In terms of in museum language, you can have a set of jamal or masterpiece on the wall. Okay. It may have intellectual value, it may have historical value, whatever value. But in museum language, if you put it on the wall and nobody look at it, nobody look at it, nobody engage with it, nobody talking in front of it, discussing in front of it, it has zero engagement value. Tak ada nilai dalam bahasa museum. It's the same thing with your artworks. If you put up your artwork in the museum and nobody, they call it retaining value. They just pass by. You can say that your works have been done out of very good research, blah blah blah, and you get an A. But in museum language, if nobody engage with your artwork, it's a failure. So it is important to understand the language of curation, the language of museum as a building, the language of space. You need to know that. Okay, so hopefully we can have furthermore discussion on communication and curation. Maybe we can get Prof. Datuk untuk datang, having a more intimate and casual session with you guys. Okay, so use that opportunity. Okay, so as a moderator, I think I want to thank Prof. Datuk for coming. Always a pleasure. Dia dah jadi macam kita punya honorary member lah. InsyaAllah dia datang je kita pasal lagu keroncong. Okay, sebab dia selalu pakai batik dia kan, kita masuk pada keroncong mood. Okay, so maybe next year kot, kalau ada apa-apa idea pameran gila sikit, please do collaborate. Tengoklah yang mencabar. Ada soalan lagi? Okay, silakan.
Ada soalan daripada student, saya minta dia malu nak teruskan. Saya tanya dalam konsep tu. Okey, ada satu soalan. Nama tidak boleh diberi, malu. Okey, pendapat tentang budaya melawat muzium dan galeri. Apa pendapat tentang budaya melawat muzium dan galeri? Because nowadays people go to just do TikTok.
People go to do.
Just to do TikTok.
Oh, okay. Oh, new culture. Aware of that. Aware.
Very pertinent.
Yeah. Well, melawat museum ni is boleh dikatakan satu masalah seluruh dunia. Tapi kalau kita tengok di katalah di Britain, orang queue masuk museum. queue is long. Japan pun sama. Di Malaysia ni ada satu benda yang saya kira satu yang most penting ialah kerajaan ialah tidak melabur secukupnya untuk ruang museum, untuk institusi museum. There is no cultural investment. There is insufficient cultural investment. What do you mean by cultural investment? Cultural investment ni bermaksud satu, promote museum, satu membentuk satu naratif baru terhadap museum. Kita naratif museum yang naratif lama, naratif yang akan lapor, yang masih digunakan. Kita perlu ada satu naratif, dan Perbualan sedang menunjukkan satu naratif baru. Ini bagus, ini yang terbaik, yang perlu diikuti oleh semua museum di Malaysia. Satu naratif baru. Satu lagi ialah insentif untuk melalui museum, dan kita perlu melihat museum ini sebagai satu ruang untuk pelajaran, pendidikan. Bukan TikTok, bukan tengok pameran ataupun lalu cross untuk dapat poin dan sebagainya. Tapi sebagai satu pengalaman, a multi-sensorial kind of experience. Multi-sensorial kita baru ni pameran tanah air. Ini pun nak beritahu UIA akan pick up so the multi-sensorial, dan juga the idea of museum macam yang last 2 years sleep in the museum. I don't know, but itu mungkin itu idea lama. Museum bukan merupakan gedung macam rumah hantu. Ia adalah satu ruang pencerahan where you interact with reality, you interact with yourself, you interact with science, you interact with nature, you interact with technology. Bukan hanya, of course, kalau art, there is a certain interaction with art. What is art? Jadi semua ini mesti diceritakan semula, dan juga bukan perkara yang tidak begitu penting ataupun tidak begitu terdesak. Bangunan museum itu tidak attract orang. Bangunan itu penting. Macam satu contoh yang saya buat kritikan ialah perpustakaan negara di Jalan Tun Razak. Not attractive to me. I mean, of course, aesthetics is all relative. Art is relative. It's subjective lah. Subjective kan. Tapi it's not attractive at all. And some kata the art gallery is like gedung yang tak ada estetik. Ada orang kata, bukan saya. Tapi apa yang penting ialah satu cerita baru, museum, rebranding of museum di Malaysia, dan semua museum di bawah kajian persekutuan ataupun di bawah kajian negeri mesti melihat semula, menilai semula the whole concept of museum sebagai satu institusi. Dan ini boleh diwawarkan, dan sebagainya boleh menarik masyarakat datang ke museum as part of public education, dan satu lagi public history.
Saya rasa salah satu strategi yang boleh dieksperimen adalah museum menjadi satu ruang yang benar-benar publik. Maksudnya, contohnya naratif yang mengizinkan publik membina naratif instead of one way. Maknanya kalau pengunjung itu datang dan dia menjadi pengunjung yang pasif, yang hanya mendengar naratif satu pihak, iaitu pihak museum, kurator, saya rasa itu tidak menyeronokkan. Jadi mungkin kita kena jadikan museum sebagai satu ruang untuk naratif yang ada di sekeliling, neighbor dulu. Ini neighbor dekat pun kita tak beli. So neighbor dekat tu dulu, naratif mereka, cerita mereka, stories mereka, struggles mereka. Dan muzium itu menjadi satu tempat ada dan surau dan masjid lah, di mana lokal yang dekat tu boleh berkumpul dan bercakap dan menyatakan cerita mereka, struggle mereka. Dia jadi living museum lah.
This is
satu strategi lah. Maknanya kita pergi cakap benda jauh-jauh, orang Batu Uban kita tak peduli, orang kat Gelanggang sebelah ni kita tak peduli, anak-anak kat sebelah tu kita tak peduli. Jadi mungkinlah itu satu cara yang boleh menyebabkan ada sense of belonging. Aku kena pergi muzium tu sebab itulah tempat kita orang kumpul.
Your idea should be nationalized and local at the same time. Yang satu lagi ialah apa ni? I just learn selain pada bangunan muzium tu ada tempat-tempat macam yang guna ni cafe, coffee. Now
space
for that. Satu lagi ialah kedai buku. I've suggested this many times. Our museum negara is poor. When I go to museum Perak, kena tanya buku apa ada, bawa pulang pada counter. I think that a good museum will display or sell books related to things, related to any subject matter that is pertinent to the audience.
Kita cubalah, kita letak buku kan, kita buat bilik aman tu kan, kita letak buku tapi kita buat macam kafe kan, ada cushion, ada chairs, ada tempat hammock, tak datang juga. Jadi tak tahulah apa teori yang nak digunakan untuk kita selesaikan masalah tu kan. Kita tak naklah buat library tu macam old school library kan. So ada buku, bilik aman kan, bilik aman kan yang kita ada tu. Tapi kita letaklah dengan tempat lepak, kursi, boleh baring. Because now they like, I thought that they would like something like that rather than just an old promote lah. Tapi saya pun rasa nak promote lebih pun susah kan, tak buat lah kan. So it's a pertinent question. I think itu satu soalan yang sentiasa saya tanya juga. So ada soalan lain kita?
Hello.
Okay, silakan.
I have a question. First I need to introduce myself. I'm Khairul Zaman Romeo. I'm from Sabah and I'm studying at USM Fine Art, and this is my 4th year, which is like last year. This is kind of like my personal question, a selfish of mine. I want to ask Dr. mentioned about thought, which is ideas, So I want to know, it's just a simple question. What Dr. thoughts about art? And from me, it's sincere. What is like a meaning like Dr. for art? Yeah, basically, like why art? That's
a difficult question.
Yes.
Art can be anything.
What? Pardon?
Art can be anything.
Alright.
Art, it can be anything. It can be something tangible. Can be things non-tangible. It can be what we consume. Even food that we eat can be art. The cuisine that we like can be art. Also, when you talk about art, there has to be some kind of representation and presentation. Presentation and representation. What does it represent? And how is it represented? So that is art. It's something. Perhaps one person can say it's a piece of painting. Painting is one small aspect. But anything can be art. The landscape that you see is art, although you can't hold it. Things that you will not be able to feel tangibly is art. I mean, there are 4 things which, since you asked this question, I want to contextualize it in the context of the belief, in the context of the projection of national identity. It's centered on Buddhi, B-U-D-I. Buddhi. And Buddhi is very defined as a network of intelligence, which also involves reasoning and emotion at the same time. Rationality, irrationality, and irrationality. That's succinctly, briefly, what Buddhi is all about. And Buddhi is much conscious among Malay society. Other races, other ethnic groups also have Buddhi. Japanese, the Chinese, But also, I'm trying to derive at where Buddhi comes from. I mean, essentially, etymologically, it comes from Buddha, Buddhi, the Bodhi tree, Buddhi, enlightenment. So, and Buddhi is a category and it's a consciousness in the Malay story. If we look at the hikayats over the last few hundred years, you find the word Buddhi. And you find the word akal inserted in the hikayats from the 1500. But before that, there was the word akal was not there, the word Buddhi is there. To extend ourselves, there are three other elements. Jiwa, without Buddhi, you have Jiwa. Jiwa is soul or spirit. Rupa, form, and rasa. Rasa means feel or taste. So when you talk about art, whether it's tangible or non-tangible, it must have these four things. The crucible is Buddhi. The manifestation is Rupa, Rasa, and Jiwa.
Okay, Perhati. Okay.
So basically, from like Dato perspective, art's more on like feeling emotion or like more on like mentally intellectual.
Is it feeling or intellect?
Is it?
Feeling or intellect?
Artwork for Doctor, or for Dato. Yeah.
Art can be rational. Okay. Normally when people associate art with sentiment, with feelings, with emotion. Right? But on the other hand, art also is associated with rationality. Rationality means the sequential logic and reasoning of things. Whether rationality in thought, rationality in culture, in the ideas, or rationality in the materials. Also, there is the third one, which is irrational. Irrationality, neither rational nor irrational. Irrational. And this element of irrationality only exists in the context of the Buddhi. Or perhaps also, I think, in other non-European culture, not in the Cartesian sense. Okay? The Cartesian rationality is centered on the mind, and mind is centered with rationality. But when we talk about the art, in the context of, say, one group or one worldview, then there is another element, another component, which is the irrational component, which is not present in the European mind, but which is present in non-European minds and non-European people. I'm not using the word mind because when people ask me, does the Malay have the mind? So the Malay does not have mind. The Malay has the Buddhi. Because mind connotes rationality and irrationality. It does not cater for the irrationality. So this is where I think when we talk about art, it has both the it has all three. The emotion, irrationality, rationality, and irrationality.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Right. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, silakan. Kak Melia, depan.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Kimia Yasin. I'm a third year fine art student. It's not exactly a question, but more of an opinion that I would like you to elaborate more on. In my opinion, the reason why the music culture is not popular or practiced in Malaysia is because we are not familiar or we cannot relate to. Like for example, if you watch a lot of European movies, American movies, you see people going to dates in museum, or you see even in adventure movies like what is it that treasure or something movies. There's mysteries in the painting or mysteries in the statues. When we look, it implores us to go there and see, what? I didn't know that this painting is there. I didn't know that these statues. And it implores us as the, I would say, people who don't, in general, people who don't learn about this, to go and see for themselves and learn for themselves. If you watch Japanese movie or Japanese media in general, they or they want to go on date, they go to museum, they go to intellectual places. Instead of like, if you watch Malaysian drama, they go to shopping mall, they go to restaurant. There is no intellectual aspect of that in general. So, in my opinion, do you think that our consumption of media really affect how we view museums?
Our consumption of media affect how we view museums.
Yes.
It depends on what media we consume. But the whole country need to elevate and put popularize the idea of popularizing knowledge and science has not taken root yet in so much in Malaysia. When you talk about popularizing knowledge and science, it involves the museum, and this is where I think there has to be a campaign to popularize museum, not for its own sake, but where we engage with science and knowledge. We engage with the world in the museum. We engage with reality in the museum. The West is clever at that, because the West always, over the modern period, has always mediated the environment, even before the internet. They have done that well. And how they popularize. Their initiative at popularizing science and knowledge has been around for a few hundred years. In a way, we have that, but it is not consistent, and it is not being done sufficiently. So I think one way is perhaps some universities, some institution. I was, about 2 decades back, trying to initiate this idea of the popularization of science, which includes museum, actually. But I was asked, what's the benchmark? So again, there's a problem. This is in line with the National Science Policy in 1996, and I was trying to initiate a National Science Communication Policy. The museum is one stakeholder. But it faltered along the way. So again, various initiatives at that, and how the media, when you talk about the media, is how the media portrays museum by our producers is so important. So again, the production in the media of stories, for example, should deconstruct the orthodoxy of the museum and create a new story for the museum and libraries and so on. Meaning you can deal in library and bookshops. So
yeah. But to be fair, most museums, I'm not going to point, maybe this museum as well, most museums are boring place. To be fair, when I was appointed as a director, excuse for being a moderator sekejap, case study. I was appointed to be a director in 2005. I said no, don't put me in a museum. I'm going to be dead. So please. So I thought that I was punished by Tan Sri Zul and Dr. Najib. So I went to see Dr. Najib. Apa kesalahan saya? I was banished to the museum. That was the perception. That was my perception of a museum. I was banished to the museum. Because to be fair, museums have been a very dead, cold, very boring place. So partly that's fine. We have to acknowledge that first. So this is what Dr. Zul told me. If you don't like museum, I put you as the director. You turn it into a place that you like first. You must like it first. If you who hated museum then like going to museum, then other people who hated museum will also come. So I use myself So what will I change? I don't like this and so. So we need to have that attitude first. Then only we can make people come. So it has to start from the museum itself. That the museum itself, if they want people to come, they want it to be interesting place, they have to want it. If they want it, whether they have the money or they don't have the money, if you ask me, I don't have the money. We don't have big budget, which is okay, because we are creative and we can find ways. But first, we need to have that attitude. We want to change. That's all. We want.
Yeah, I think audience, visitors, you people, can put pressure on museums to change, either individually or collectively. I've done that. As an individual, I go to museums. When I see things which I'm annoyed, I will call the curator.
Yeah.
One of the things which I don't like to see in museums is what I don't see, which is enough description, proper language, accurate description of the displays and of the diorama. They don't have sufficient. Sometimes language is bad translation. I know this translation, insufficient facts, wrong facts. You point out to them. I've called the staff of the Museum Negara and I point out to Galeri D, colonial history. I said, you're looking at Malacca from the ramparts of the ship, not from Malacca town itself. Why must we look at the fall of Malacca from the Portuguese? If you want to decolonize the museum, look at the fall of Malacca or look at Malacca from the town of Malacca, looking at the Portuguese ships attacking. So this is to turn around the narrative. So it should come from you. You have to be activists. The public would have to be activists who advocate or should advocate for a better museum.
The museum also should democratize itself from becoming an elitist place that only some clever people can go, or people who sort of know something about art or fine art or high art. You don't know about art, you don't come to museum. Only artists or art collectors can go to museums because they are the kind of elite and high intellectual people. That has been, we have to sort of deconstruct that. We need to deconstruct that. In order to deconstruct that, we need to be inclusive. We need to be inclusive. So people feel that they are welcome, even though they know nothing about art, know nothing about culture, they still feel welcome. And from all range of age, not only from a certain range. But it's a challenge lah. But I like the question and it is very pertinent. First thing I do is ask ourselves whether we want to change or not. Some people, some museums, some people in the museums, they don't want to change. They don't want to change, so what can we do? So those who want to do something, that will be interesting. Okay? But pertinent question. So you guys also have to come to the museum and show your work and change the landscape of the museum and ask people to come, like your seniors. When your seniors were here before, so many people came, and when they came, the responses for their exhibitions, even though they don't know anything about art, interesting. They were like so surprised. Oh, art can be like this, art can be like this. But you have to be around. So you make it a place that you own the place. For what lah, right? Pertinent question. So ada lagi tak? Kalau tidak, saya agak lapar kan ni. Dan saya rasa Datuk pun dah berkeroncong di dalam perutnya. Dan anda pun macam nak balik ya. So again, there is no question. I think I will end this session. Again, thank you very much for Datuk for coming. Maybe next time we can invite him. We can have a closer chat with him. Kemudian later. So thank you very much for coming, whether you are here or physically or online. So I will pass the session back to MC kita lah, Encik Abdul Nizam, silakan.
Terima kasih kepada kita juga, Prof. Datuk memberikan dan moderator kita, Prof. Sunil Masihul. So saya akhiri siri 7 di sini. Peringatan kepada pelajar-pelajar, kalau yang belum scan kehadiran, sudah scan QR code di kaunter. Okey, scan. Terima kasih.
Okey, terima kasih semua ya. Nak ambil gambar? Berdiri dulu. Standing position first.